Hi there guys, welcome to another episode. This week I'm dealing with my daily driver again. This is my 2015 Ford Focus 1.6 diesel. On some of my social media I did put up a picture the other day of it at its MOT where it passed with flying colours. There was no problem with it, but there is a problem with it. It's kind of a weird problem. I don't really know what it is. This is my guess as to what it is. And I'm hoping that this solves the problem, but I don't know. So the problem is the temperature inside the car. My best guess at the moment is the thermostat and the thermostat housing, so I will be replacing them now, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be the problem. What I'll do now is talk you through what's happening, and if anybody else has got any other ideas as to what it can be, put a comment down below. I would love to know if anybody else has had this problem, and if you did, what was the problem? So the problem started a couple of weeks ago, and oh my god, excuse that. Oh, don't look at this part because it's disgusting. But anyway, we're going to look at the temperature gauge just there. So the problem is the temperature gauge here. When I drive the car, it's normally around about the middle section here, which is, from what I can gather working this out, it's about 90 degrees there, which is about what the engine should be at. The problem I'm getting with this car is that occasionally it'll go really quickly up to 90 degrees. When it does go up to 90 degrees, I get really cold air out of the vents. And I mean like really cold. It's like it's taking air straight from outside and nothing is going through the heater packet. I can drive along for a bit. I'll start to see my breath in the air and it's getting really cold. And all of a sudden I'll see the gauge drop quite slowly down to 60 degrees where it is here again. And then I get heat out of the gauges. And the gauge will then creep up very slowly. Sometimes it'll get stuck at this second mark here. And that's where it'll go. And I'll have lots of heat. It'll be beautiful. And sometimes it'll stay there for a while and then it'll go up to the middle mark again and I'll lose the heat again. And that's where it'll stay at the 90 degrees there, and it'll be, the engine's fine. So I know that the temperature gauge is working because it's going up to the 90, the engine's not overheating, it's not going past that and cooking the engine. So it seems to be working, but I don't really know what the problem is. And I can't seem to find a pattern in it. Sometimes it'll go up to 90, sometimes it'll drop down to the bottom, sometimes it'll stay on that first mark, which is about 75 degrees. And sometimes it'll be in between the two, and sometimes I lose heat here, sometimes I gain heat here, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It doesn't seem to matter if I put it in automatic mode or manual. It still seems to do the same sort of thing. So I don't really know what the problem is. So as I say, the engine isn't actually overheating, but I don't really know what is the problem with it. I've been looking at the reservoir. The coolant seems to be okay. Don't seem to know what it is. Occasionally I get pressure coming out of the system when you open the bleed valve. Don't know why. If it's leaking air somewhere but it's not actually leaking out any water, I don't know. So I don't really know what the problem is. I kind of get a feeling it's like an air bubble that keeps floating around the system, and every so often it'll get stuck at the thermostat, and that's when I lose the temperature completely. And sometimes it'll move around to the heater packet and I don't get any heat that way, and sometimes it'll be fine and I'll get loads of warmth and heat and it seems to be okay for a while, but then it moves and I don't get any heat again. So I really don't know what the problem is. So I've decided I'm going to start with the thermostat, and I'll start by changing the thermostat, and hopefully that solves the problem. While I've got everything apart, I will put some water through the system and try and flush it through to try and get rid of any crap, debris, anything that might be in the system. So I'll try and flush it through and hopefully that might solve a problem. I don't know, but I'm going to start with the thermostat anyway. So I bought a new thermostat. Now this is an integrated thermostat, so the thermostat is in there and you can't take it out. It also comes with the temp sensor fitted. You can take them out, but I'm not going to. And it does have the bleed nipple up the top there. So it's 4 bolts, as you can see there, 2 on that side, 2 on that side. Doesn't look all that difficult to take off, and there's 4 hoses that connect it and a vacuum pipe under there. So it doesn't look a massive job. Now I bought this one from a Swedish company called Skruvat.se. It looks alright, I can't see anything really wrong with this, but this did bother me slightly when I opened the box. Somebody's greasy, dirty fingerprints all over the box. It did get me worried slightly that perhaps this was a used part, but I can't see anything. I can't see that it's a used part, so I don't think this is used. I think somebody's just touched the box with disgusting greasy prints. But if anybody wants to get if anybody can get like a fingerprint off that, tell me who's touched it, I'll be quite happy to find out. So I'm going to start off by draining the system, and then we're going to take the thermostat housing off. So we're going to start by opening the expansion bottle. As you can see, this is one of the things that's kind of worrying me. There's air coming out of that pipe, and it did have pressure in that system, and all I've done is move the car onto the ramp. I've not done a lot else with it. So it's getting pressure in the system over that very short space of time, and I don't really know why. And hopefully you can see that there are actually bubbles coming through that pipe there into this expansion tank. So we've opened that up, and now we're going to go underneath and drain the fluid out of the car. Now, Ford used to do this on a lot of older cars, and I didn't know they still did it, but there is actually a drain plug just there, and there's a little tap coming out of there. So I've put a bit of a hose on this. It's a 10mm pipe on there, and if I open that plug now, all the coolant will run out of that pipe, so I'll be able to put it into a tub and get rid of it properly. So rather than just it pouring all over the floor, they've got a little drain plug there, so that's quite handy. I didn't do shit. That was weird. Doesn't do anything. Okay, so nothing happened for ages, and then I found out eventually you need to twist it a bit more. So I twisted it more than what it was, and now there is coolant coming out. It's not coming out very fast though. I thought it would be coming out faster than that, but it's coming out at least. Right, so that is the thermostat housing. It's got the coolant temperature sensor there. I think that's the hose for the heater matrix. One of these goes to the bottom of the radiator, and one of these goes to the top of the radiator. I think that one's to the top of the radiator, and that one's to the bottom of the radiator. So there's 3 clamps on here, the connector for the temperature sensor, and then there's 4 bolts in the front there. So it's not a massive job to change this. So I'm going to get a tool on there now and undo these clips. Second hose and plenty of coolant. So that's the hoses disconnected. I'm using one of these tools. It's a handheld tool. It's got two jaws here that hook into the clip, and then when you squeeze it, it locks it down and keeps a constant pressure on the clips. Now these clips are lockable clips, so with them like this, it's locked in position, and you press that down when you want to release it. So they're quite handy. So now it's just the 4 bolts to get off. So the old one there and the new one there. Now the only difference I can see is the inner part here of this one looks to be more closed than that one. So I don't know if it's having an effect on it in any way, but that seems to be more open than that one does. Well, while I got it off, I thought I may as well have a play around with it. So I've got a heat gun here that I can heat up really rather warm, and I thought I'll blast some hot air into there and we'll see what happens. Right, so that didn't take long with this heat gun, but it did move and it did close the thermostat as it should do. So we'll let that cool down again now, but that thermostat did seem to actually work when it got up to temperature. Well, it seems to be working, but I've got a new one now, so I'm going to fit it anyway. Right, so that is it bolted back into place with the 4 bolts there. And now just put the hoses back on again, which will just push into place. Like so, fairly easy. You just need a little screwdriver to, I think you lift this lip over that little edge there and they snap back into place and lock. So, not quite sure how you do that, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. Right, so that is the thermostat back in place. These clips are alright, just watch your fingers on them, because as soon as you let them go they do spring back into place. If you get your fingers caught it can hurt. And the one that's really a bit of a pain is the one at the back there. Is the one at the back here that you can't really see. You can see this one at the front here, but there's one behind that one. That's a bit of a pain to get to. But that is where this tool comes in really handy, because it's really bendy and you can get into pretty much everywhere with it. So that's a really, really handy tool. I'd recommend one of them. Electrical connector back on again, and it's got this little bleeding valve here. Now, don't make the mistake that I did. These don't have anything inside of there, so if you take this off while the engine's running it will actually squirt out coolant, and it can be quite hot. So be very, very careful with that when you do take that off. Try to do it with the engine either cold or stationary if you're going to bleed it through there. So now I need to fill up with coolant in there. I have read a little bit now about how to bleed the system, and basically fill it up slowly. It needs to fill up really, really slowly in there, otherwise you will get air trapped in the system. So we'll fill that up slowly, start the engine, and then it needs to rev at about 2,500 revs for a few minutes for the air to circulate, and then it needs to come up into temperature. So we're first going to put the air filter box back in again, and then we're going to start to bleed the system. Right, so the cooling system in the car takes 7.3 litres. Now I've got this, it's supposed to be red, and I need to get it to really cover the -40 that we may drop down to -40, but definitely -30 we get over in Sweden. So I need to mix 50-50 with this. So this is a 3 litre tub, so I'm going to mix 3 litres of this and then 3 litres of water together, and that I can put in the system. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have too much of this when I'm done with it, because definitely don't think I got 7.3 litres out of that system. But I'm going to mix it anyway, and if I need more, then I've got more. and I'll be able to keep whatever's left over in this tub, but I definitely don't think I'll be needing all 7.3 litres. Well, it's bubbling a lot. Well, I'm going to let that keep bubbling for a few minutes before I fill any more up in it, but it's definitely got air in the system. Right, so I've now filled that up a couple of times already. I've been squeezing hoses and I've got air out of there. So hopefully I've got all the air out of there. One thing that I have on my car that probably not a lot of you in other countries have got, but that is at the back there, just there, and this is a diesel heater. So it gets diesel in from the engine into this. It's got a little glow plug in it, and it puts diesel into there. It's got a little pump, so you've got a coolant pipe there in, and you've got a coolant pipe there out. So this also has water into it and a little pump that circulates it, so I can start the diesel pump while I'm driving, or I can do it on a timer as well. So this does need to be bled as well, and it does have a secondary bleed point just there as well. Now, in the film that I was watching of them bleeding this system, they obviously didn't have a diesel heater, so I don't really know if I need to bleed that at all. I have had it open just now and there is no coolant in there at the moment, so I'm not quite sure how to bleed that at the moment. But I'm going to start the car up, and what I've seen on a film is that you need to run it and you need to rev it for about 2,500 revs for a couple of minutes. So I'm going to do that now, and hopefully that should start to get the air out of it. I'll probably need to top it up a bit if it does get a lot of air in there. So I'm going to start it up, rev it for a couple of minutes, and then after that I'm going to leave it for a while to get up to temperature, and hopefully we get all the air out of this system and my heating system works again. Right, so I've had that at 2,500 revs for a couple of minutes now. The temp gauge has very, very slightly started to move up again. So I'm going to go and have a look now to make sure we haven't run out of coolant in there. I'm going to keep the engine running and we'll come back and have a look at the temperature gauge in a few minutes. Well, it's filled up with more. Well, it's filled up with more than what I had earlier, but I can still see air bubbles coming out every so often. Right, that was just coolant coming out of there, no air. So what I ended up doing in the end was actually revving the car, and I had it at about 3,200 revs, something like that, for about 5 minutes solid of revving it. and got the temperature gauge to go up to about the 90 degrees where I want it to be. And then when I came out here, I could start squeezing the hoses and I could see loads of air coming back to the coolant tank. So I think I've got rid of the air out of the system now. It was definitely getting warm inside the car. It was almost getting that I couldn't sit in there anymore. It was getting that warm. So there's definitely heat getting into the heater box. I've now got, as I go around the hoses, heat in every single pipe. So it did take a lot longer than I expected. So the only thing left to do now is take this for a road test and drive it home and drive it back again. Now it's pretty cold outside. It's about 15-16 degrees minus outside. So that'll be a good test to make sure the cooling system does actually do what it should do and it keeps the temperature. So I'm going to drive it home and I'll drive it back here and I'll report to you guys tomorrow. Right, so I told you I'd get back to you in a couple of days. I've been back home and I've been here again. It's not really solved the problem. So there must be something else wrong with this system that I don't know what it is. So more fault finding. But now the thermostat is changed and I know that that definitely isn't the problem. So if any of you guys have a good idea as to what it could be, please put a comment down below and I'll try and see if any of those things that you can come up with does actually help me in this problem. There's only one more problem left with that car, and that is the clutch is still not working. I changed the master cylinder, didn't work. I changed the pipe from the master cylinder to the slave cylinder, still didn't work. So I've only got one thing left to do, and that is to change the slave cylinder, which means the gearbox has to come out of this car. So that's going to be a future video. So keep a lookout for that video. Make sure you press that subscribe button so that you don't miss it. But for now, thanks a lot and bye-bye.